because I think this one's going to piss off everybody, but it's the truth. There was a story in the New York Times, the podcaster asking you to side with history's villains. It was in the New York Times. Let me read some of it. Darryl Cooper is no scholar, but legions of fans, many on the right, can't seem to resist what he presents as hidden truths. All of a sudden, everyone was coming for Darryl Cooper. There were the newspaper columnists, the historians, the Jewish groups. Repugnant, says the chairman of Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Museum, in a statement. Even the Biden White House released a statement calling him a Holocaust denier who spreads Nazi propaganda. So it was, for a time, for Mr. Cooper, one of the most popular podcasters in the country, to do what he does best, hit record. In a special episode of his history program, MartyrMade, Mr. Cooper addressed the controversy which had exploded out of September 2nd appearance on the Tucker Carlson show, the podcast started by the former Fox News host. At first, Mr. Cooper, a gifted historic storyteller, but not a trained historian, defended the claims he had made on Mr. Carlson's show. One that Winston Churchill was the chief villain of the war, ridiculous, not by implication, Adolf Hitler. Two, that millions had died in Nazi-controlled Eastern Europe because Nazis had not adequately planned to feed them. Okay, not true. He then said, the story goes on to say, then kind of retracted some of that stuff. This emotional ventriloquism is part of Mr. Cooper's approach and appeal. On TikTok, a fan praised him as one of the best historians of our time because he tries to go out of his way to understand the perspective of everyone involved in a situation. These critics have probably helped make Mr. Cooper bigger than ever. He has been the most subscribed to history newsletter on Substack, one spot ahead of the eminent economic historian Adam Tooze's in the wake of the Rogan interview MartyrMade, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so they go on and on and on to talk about how this just can't stand. I mean, there's got to be some sort of filter. And, Joe Rogan just can't have on whoever he wants to have on. That's the problem. Is it, New York Times? Is that the problem? It's really interesting. Now, let me just look and let me just look in the past here and see if we've had this exact same problem with anybody else. Because the person that came to mind was not Darryl Cooper, but Nikole Hannah Jones. Because I think those two are the same coin. And the coin's counterfeit, but just opposite sides of the same coin. The MartyrMade Podcast spins a tale of grievance and distrust, and it's wrapped enough in enough fact to keep it plausible. But there are some facts in there. Okay. Jones, she did the 1619 Project. She did the same thing in reverse, except I think she's actually worse. I mean, because I think she made up almost everything in that. She recasts American history as racist from the very inception of the country. Neither one of them is telling the whole truth. Neither one of them. Neither one wants to, I think. They're both in the business of narrative and not history. So am I. But I try to be fair. The real problem is not these two. Honestly, it's the New York Times.
A lot of people don't know that I'm a painter, and I gave up painting because of demoralizing pain in my hands. I was losing hope. If pain keeps you from really living, I urge you to do what I did. Try Relief Factor. Relief Factor is a 100% drug-free supplement developed by doctors. It's safe to take every day, and it has helped me and so many others. You can try their 3-week quick start right now, $19.95 at relieffactor.com.
Because in their Sunday Styles write-up on Cooper, the Times poses as a concerned observer, wary of growing influence among the disaffected right. Why are we disaffected? Why is the right disaffected? We're disaffected because you have tried to take our country from us, everything that we believe, our history, our values, our traditions, and you've tried to denigrate them and destroy them every step of the way. And you've done it with one lie right after another. Okay? Why are they framing him not with facts, but with suspicion? Not because he's dishonest or not dishonest, but because he's popular. They clutch their pearls because he has an audience, and only the New York Times can have that audience. But where was that concern when they gave an audience to Nikole Hannah Jones? and gave her a Pulitzer for a project now so discredited by the very historians that are now talking about Cooper. Where was the caution when they declared that 1619, not 1776, was the true founding of the nation? They didn't question her authority. They didn't say, well, she's not a historian. They printed it. In fact, they taught it and endorsed it. They platformed it in schools. That's different than anything that Joe Rogan is doing. They platformed it in schools. So let's be clear, okay? I think both Cooper and Jones are wrong. They may have points worth considering, but I think that they get it fundamentally wrong in a few places. They are looking at facts to sell the story and not necessarily reveal the truth. Now, maybe I'm being too cynical, but that's the way I see it. And I'm not condemning either one. I'm condemning all of those on the left or the right that are now doing the same thing that the New York Times did with Cooper, but didn't do with Hannah Nikole Jones. Only one of those two was lauded by the New York Times as legitimate and a necessary corrective, even though it was all a lie, made up. So that's what, when I'm reading that op-ed in the New York Times, I can't take the hypocritical nature of it. Blood shoots out of my eyes. Because that's what the New York Times is actually saying. Don't you little people understand? We must decide what stories are acceptable. Not you, not somebody like Joe Rogan. We will decide which distortions are virtuous and which ones are dangerous. Not you. We get to choose the false prophets that get a column, which ones are called conspiracy theorists. We at the New York Times, we in the media. And that is the problem. This isn't about the authors. Okay, First Amendment gives them a right to say whatever they want. You may not like it. If you don't like it, stop listening. Well, but other people might listen. Yeah, well, other people might listen. And maybe we should pay more attention to our education in our schools. Maybe we should pay more attention so we don't become somebody that is a dummy themselves because this is the problem. We don't have a press that exposes lies anymore. We have a press that curates the lies. I really think this is why I started collecting. We have now the third largest collection of founding documents in the American Journey experience, along with David Barton's Wall Builders. It's only behind the National Archives and the Library of Congress. Most people don't know it because, we don't talk about it yet. Beginning in 26, we're going to be making a big deal out of it. We also have the largest collection of Pilgrim-era artifacts and documents in the world. The largest. So I can tell you what happened in Jamestown in 1619. I can tell you this. The ship that Hannah Nikole Jones talks about, there were no slaves on that ship. How do I know? We have the manifest. No slaves. That seems problematic, doesn't it? And the Mayflower did not launch a system of slavery. In fact, they fought against it. This is so crazy. What the Pilgrims did against slavery was remarkable. Remarkable. When a slave ship accidentally came into their port, slavery was against the law. They called it man stealing. It was against the law. And as soon as that slave came into port, you could smell a slave ship. They knew exactly what it was. And they marched up and they arrested the captain of the ship. They put him in irons and put him in jail. And then these people who were already paying 50% of everything they made, these poor people, 50% of everything they made to a king that they despised, but they paid it because they wanted just to stay alive. They took up a collection from each other, not outside, from each other. Got a new captain, refueled, restocked the ship, and sent those people, those slaves, back to Africa so they could be freed. That's who our pilgrims were. Don't believe me? You don't have to take my word for it. We have the evidence. please. You know, the longest running treaty with Native Americans happened with our Pilgrims. And you know who broke it? Not the white man. It was the Native Americans. And you know why? Because after years and years of the Pilgrims and the Native Americans getting along, Christianity was starting to seep into their culture, and they needed to go to war with a tribe. And the war, that the way they used to fight it, the Native Americans, it was okay to enslave your enemy. In fact, you needed to. You could torture them after you won just to make a point. And then you could enslave anybody you wanted. And Christianity said, no, you can't do either one of those things. And so the Native Americans that were part of this tribe that were friends and under this treaty with the Pilgrims, they started telling their chief, you know, we can't do these things. And the chief got so pissed because he's like, we're fighting a war and we're fighting it the way we've always fought it, that they broke the treaty. Did you know that? No, we were just horrible. We stole the land. Did America live up to its ideals? No. Has anybody ever? Have you? Has the Pope? Has anybody really lived up to their ideals all the time? No. But you have ideals, and that's what matters. By the way, on the other side, I also happen to own a few original Nazi documents from the actual perpetrators. I've got documents from the engineer that actually calculated how much Zyklon B it would take to murder a room full of Jews. Okay? It wasn't because they didn't they didn't have enough food. This was calculated. I have the final prescription signed by Dr. Mengele for 1,000 liters of luminol for the so-called children's hospital. That's how the Reich was killing the undesirables in the children's hospital. They didn't do it in a frenzy. It wasn't in a riot. It wasn't out of desperation. It was silence in lab coats with bureaucrats and experts signing off, and the press, like the New York Times, refusing to say a word about it. The scariest people are not the ones in the streets. They weren't. They were the ones with titles, with offices, with press credentials. They were the ones with the doctorates. They were the people who decided what could be published, who could be punished, what could be known, what could be said. And that's the danger that we're staring down right now. Not from fringe theorists on a podcast, not even from overzealous academics with a Pulitzer, but from the institutions that bless one distortion and condemn the other. Not based on truth, but based on usefulness. Is it useful to our side? I just want you to know, this is my stance on this, and make this very, very clear. The First Amendment does not exist to protect comfortable speech. It doesn't exist to protect Cooper as opposed to Jones. It exists to protect both of them. It protects uncomfortable points of view, things you do not like to hear, and disagreement. It protects people who are absolutely wrong and even those who are lying. It protects the process so you can figure it out. There is no licensed priesthood in our country, that are the priesthood of truth tellers. No official ministry of facts. That's where countries go wrong. The Times should be exposing both sides of these stories, just like I'm doing. The distortions of the right and the left. But instead, they become exactly what they've warned us about. A newspaper that prints dogma and not dialogue. And the real problem here? No, the real solution here is you. Jefferson warned that a man who reads nothing but newspapers, a man who reads nothing is better informed than a man who only reads the newspaper. Okay, I would say the newspaper is today's social media. Man who reads nothing is more well-educated than a man who just only reads social media. But today we might say, better to be ignorant than confidently misled by trusted media. They see themselves not as a watchdog, but as a shepherd, and we are the sheep. So I'm not defending either one. I'm defending the idea that we, the people, not the institutions, not the elites, not the New York Times, not Joe Rogan, you decide what's true. And that takes work and it takes curiosity. Maybe the other guy's wrong. I don't know. Maybe I don't have the whole story either. I don't know. Look it up. Because the minute you let somebody else decide what you're allowed to hear, you have already surrendered your freedom to think.